Welcome, everybody. It's my delight to be able to introduce tonight Father Bernhard Udelhoven, originally from Germany, but he's been in Zambia for 30 years now, about 25 years, okay. Got a master's in London, but this is the first time he's been to the United States, which I just found out over dinner, which is really remarkable. But been around the world. We actually met in a conference in Nairobi 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, and I was fascinated by the work that he's been doing in Zambia. So he's a priest, he's a member of the Missionaries of Africa, and he's been working on issues that seem perhaps exotic to us, but then you open your Bibles and you discover that a guy named Jesus was dealing with these sorts of issues all the time, right? Demonic possession is something that occurs often in the Gospels, and people in the West have a tendency to think witchcraft has something to do with, sitcoms or something like that. It's a very real, tangible issue in Zambia and in other places around the world. And so Bernhard has developed a ministry for dealing with people who have been accused of witchcraft, dealing with people who regard themselves as being having had a curse put on them, people who regard themselves as being under some kind of demonic influence. The spirit world is a world that's kind of very tangible, but it's also a world that carries with it a great deal of danger. And so Bernhard has developed in actual practice and in theory a way of being culturally sensitive while dealing with these issues, while also trying to bring healing to these kinds of contexts as well. His book, which Karen is holding up back there, Unseen Worlds, one of the really interesting, groundbreaking works in in how to deal with these sorts of phenomena. So, without any further ado, please join me in giving a warm Chicago welcome to Father Bernhard.
So, big thank you to Bill and to all your team for inviting me. As you say, it's my first time to be in the States, in Chicago, great. And yeah, good to see you all. And the title tonight, the title is very long, maybe just to break it up a bit. Witchcraft and Demons in a World of Plural Beliefs. That means that, well, these terms mean different things to different people. They mean different things to us here in this room. Also, I will speak from the Zambian background. Also in Zambia, they mean different things to different people. It's even like, to give an example, a woman has a husband, and in Zambia, a man can marry quite young girls, but if you are a 40-year-old woman, you cannot marry a 20-year-old boy. But a 40-year-old man, if I divorce my wife, I can very easily marry a girl who is even maybe only 16, 17, 18, 20. So it's very easy for a man to get another wife, but very difficult for a divorced woman with some children to find another husband. So many women, for example, in Zambia, they use medicines, local medicines, to keep their husbands. For them, it's medicine. For the husband, it's witchcraft, So it often, even in a certain culture, it means different things to different people. And some of us, like myself, we have grown up in an environment very marked by the Enlightenment. We question everything, and really witchcraft and demons for us belong into another world, in the past world of people who are not quite up with modern life. There are others who live in a world which is also populated by witches and by demons. Then if you have a look at the subtitle, it's a relational and culture-sensitive approach for helping the afflicted and the accused. Relational, it means that we look at people's relationships. We don't look at the demons in themselves or at the witchcraft in itself, what it is, because it's beyond what we can know. But we look at people's relationships and how they are affected by them. And culture sensitive, it means that different cultures provide us with means to find out which relationships are particularly affected. People like in Zambia have maybe hundreds of years of experience. They are diviners, they are healers who have been dealing with people who have spirits or who are affected by witchcraft successfully. So they developed certain methods to see into which relationships certain afflictions point to, and those relationships we want to address. So very often the culture helps us to find out actually which relationships we want to look at. Zambia, just to make ourselves familiar, it's in southern Africa. There you have it on the map. So this is where my experience comes from. And the approach which I'm presenting was developed by a group called the Fingers of Thomas. Fingers of Thomas, it refers to the doubting Thomas of the Bible. The one who wanted to see and touch for himself before he believed in the risen Lord. So we took him a bit as a bridge to help us where people believe different things about the spiritual world. Also, we want to touch something of their experiences. And this group, it started as a research group, but very quickly it developed into a support group for people who experience spiritual attacks, who want help from the church. But also people who are accused to be witches or Satanists. Satanism in Zambia is something very different from here, but the term comes from here. And there you see already that the terms of witchcraft, of spirits, what I present is not some cultural beliefs just in Zambia, but all the beliefs have developed through interaction, and also through interaction with the modern world. And the concept of Satanism has been integrated very well in Zambia in people's way of making sense out of the world. So there are some people who experience afflictions and who look maybe for a witch. There are others who stand actually accused to be witches, which can be very brutal in Zambia. Alone in the parish in which I work, we have every year at least one case of somebody I know who is killed in mob justice, often by their own families, beaten to death or killed in another way because people believe them to be witches. And even they themselves also believe in witchcraft, and they are also caught in a web of fear and not knowing how to react when they are accused. Then finally in our group we have a number of people who see themselves as witches, but especially as Satanists. I will explain that a bit later on, meaning people who themselves come to an awareness, I don't belong really in this world, I don't belong into my family, I don't belong into the church, doesn't make any sense to me, I belong somewhere else. And when everybody was afraid of Satanism in Zambia, they came up, often very young people, who say, I'm one of them. And I did this and this in the world of Satanism. So the group became quite a mixture of different people. And we looked for an approach which makes sense to all those groups. Because if you help only those who are afflicted, in the end you start accusing others to be witches or to be demon-possessed and so forth. I believe that the concern that the group took up is relevant beyond Zambia and also beyond Africa. Why? Here is a map with some numbers. Obviously, numbers we should always take with a pinch of salt, but these numbers, they speak about the number of Christians. How many Christians are where? And you see that today, it seems that in Africa live the most number of Christians worldwide. It was always Latin America until very recently. Now it seems Africa has overtaken the world as the continent with most Christians. 631 million they estimate, rightly or wrongly. Myself, I come from Germany. I joined the order I'm in, the White Fathers, quite early, straight after school. And often people ask me, why do you want to go to Africa? We need priests in Germany. And it's very true, and I never knew what to answer. I just knew somehow this was my way for me, but I never could give an answer. But today I do give an answer. I say, I want to be part of shaping the church of the future. It's like if you are a footballer, you want to play in a big team, not in some small village team. And then people stop asking me questions. But Christians who grow up in a post-Enlightenment world, secularized and disenchanted, are outnumbered by Christians who live in a world that is populated also by spirits and witches. And the gap between these two worlds is big. And I believe it's widening, and we need to engage with this gap. If we want to remain one church, we have to deal with this widening gap. Obviously, when we speak about witchcraft and demons, many beliefs have to do also with superstition. But it's very difficult to draw a line between a religious belief and superstition. I'm a Catholic. If I say that the Eucharist changes into the body and blood of Christ, many people think I'm very superstitious. But for me, no, this is my belief. And very often we draw the line that the others are superstitious, but myself, I'm very religious. Where does one draw the line? But especially about African beliefs, we have to be aware that arguments about beliefs in Africa are part of a violent and hegemonic history. African beliefs have been suppressed, they have been belittled for a long time. They have been called irrational, pagan, primitive. And even many people in Africa who went through a Western system of education are ill at ease with the beliefs of their parents, do not know how to handle them because they have been belittled for so long. And many belittle the beliefs of their parents in Africa. So that's a bit the history. It's quite difficult often to deal actually with African beliefs. I do think that superstition is there, and all of us, we are holding superstitious beliefs. And for me, what is superstition? It is to holding on rigidly to cherished beliefs, even when confronted with evidence to the contrary. For me, this is a good definition for superstition. So we do hold, all of us, superstitious beliefs. People in Africa hold plenty of superstitious beliefs, I have no doubt. And it's a good task to unmask them and to, if we have a better explanation for something, to come forth and to engage with these beliefs. A lack of engagement with beliefs increases spiritual insecurity. But at the same time, many superstitious beliefs, they clothe mysteries of life. Just look in the Catholic Church, holy water. Holy water is there to remind us of our baptism and to give us again the strength which we received in our baptisms and so on. it has been used for all kinds of other things. In the past, in Europe, it was used to sprinkle the fields for better harvests. It was used against rainstorms and diseases. We could call it superstitious. But there's always the danger that by calling something superstitious, we throw out the baby with the bath water. And very often when people hold on to a belief, there is something we can capture of the energy which it addresses. And yes, we should unmask superstitious beliefs, and I will speak more about that later, but we should also be careful not to throw out the baby with the bath water. Even if we do not always share the exact beliefs of the people we minister to, we should not fail to see the energy and also the terror that is attached to these beliefs and be challenged by it. And some of this energy can be linked to a sense of violation done to people's sense of identity, to the moral order, and also an awareness of powerlessness, vulnerability, and dependency. And I would hope people would believe less in witchcraft in Zambia because of the violence. But if you see that indeed many people feel powerless, they feel very vulnerable, they feel dependent, and their moral order is cracking everywhere in the modern world. In the past, in Zambia, we had the extended family, a system of solidarity, it's all cracking up. It's no longer working. And if you see that, it makes more sense that people indeed believe in forces which manipulate them, and they feel they have little chances against these forces. Also, an awareness of the presence of spirits and witchcraft goes hand in hand with an awareness of an interconnectedness of human life. In Africa, very often to be means to be with. You may think of the Ubuntu philosophy, Desmond Tutu, but human life is a life of belonging, belonging to somebody, and also to be affected by the people to whom we belong. And there, I think, that is for me the baby, which when we unmask certain beliefs and say, maybe some of them are superstitious, let us try not to throw this baby out. I want to show a series of pictures done by a friend of mine while we visited a number of churches which were casting out spirits and exorcisms. And to see the energy which flow out of it, you see the need which is addressed by these ceremonies. I just go through them. So I think if you witness these events where people deal with spirits, be it in form of exorcism, or we have also other traditions in Zambia where people just dance, not to cast them out, but to appease them and work with them, you see that this issue touches something in people's lives. You see that very often in a church service, people looked rather bored and they are not with it. But suddenly when a demon is cast out, everybody is with it. And you see there's a certain energy, and we have to ask ourselves, and I have to ask myself, where is this energy coming from, and be challenged by it. I also want to stress again that many beliefs in witchcraft and in spirits, they are not really traditional in the sense that they are the same beliefs as people held 100 years ago, but they were formed by the encounter with Europe, with America. there are some very interesting comparisons between the images people have in Africa, in many parts of witchcraft, and the transatlantic slave trade. This, you know, where people got taken away, never to be seen again. For people in Africa, this was witchcraft. But also people who were sold into slavery were often regarded as witches. So you have a lot of images which people hold today about witchcraft. They also may contain an historic memory of very traumatic events. And these beliefs are also relevant for us. Not only because also here we have never been disenchanted. We have never lived in a world where there are no more witches and spirits. It's quite amazing. Maybe in public life it's not so important here. But underneath, many people also here feel attacked by spiritual powers and also want help. Of course, there are also the migrant communities among us whom we minister to. But most of all, I would like to say that these beliefs, they give us another way of experiencing the self, and also about a connected and a relational spiritual life. That the way I lead my life affects spiritually other people. And my own life is affected also spiritually by other people. This is something which comes across very strongly from many African beliefs. Let me just look at, very briefly, at different concepts of the self, who we are. Let's look in the Bible. You have the old Hebrew concept of the soul. What is the soul? And in the book of Genesis, it's the body and God's breath together become the soul. For the early Hebrews, it's not that the soul lives in the body, but that the body and the breath of God together become the human soul. The old Egyptians, many of their concepts, so obviously in Egypt you have many different concepts, but they are very similar to also many African concepts. Of course, Egypt is part of Africa, but there is this idea of a composite soul. So the soul is not one thing. So the Egyptians, they wanted to be mummified because the body, again, is part of the soul, needs to be intact, hence the mummification. The name is part of the soul. They had to be remembered. There were remembrance celebrations year after year. The moment you stop to be remembered by name after your death, a part of your soul also died. And so on. So for the Egyptians, the soul was not one thing, but a very composite thing, which had to do with your descendants and the way you were remembered in the world. You had the Greeks, again, many ideas about the soul. We all remember from school Epicure, the Epicureans. For them, the soul is like the atoms. It's like it comes with birth, it goes with death. They did not believe in any eternal soul. But of course, Plato did. But for him, the soul had three parts. Reason was hopefully, the rider there is reason, but there are two horses, one very noble, that's the horse of the spirit, of honor, of truth, and so on. But then also of human desire, which was a very stubborn horse. And the rider had to keep both horses together. So he believed that the soul had different parts. You have St. Augustine, again, the soul is the rider, the body is the horse. Or again, St. Augustine, the soul is the light, and the body is the lantern. You have St. Thomas Aquinas, for him the soul is the image of God. So it's more like the organizing principle which makes us more and more God-like. You have, of course, Descartes, this dualism between mind and body, which many today want to overcome. You have a modern secular life where the body is an envelope and the soul is something private. We don't want to share it. And it is irrelevant for others. It's a very personal affair. And you have, let me call it an African model, where the soul is like an onion, relational, growing layers outside with different sorts of relationships. There you have, for example, the life forces. You have a connection to the ancestors, to a family tree. In Zambia, it's very difficult to speak about spirits or witchcraft without speaking also about the family. Witchcraft is normally inside the family. There's something wrong within the own family. And people in the past felt a strong connection to the ancestors. Now with Christian life, this was never encouraged. It was discouraged. It was bad to pray to your ancestors. In the born-again churches, you are born again, you have a clean break with the past. The past is evil, needs to be overcome very often. So people today have a rather negative image of their ancestors. But it comes back. So today we deal with curses. In the past, people who were blessed by their ancestors, today we have to remove family curses. Now this may sound exotic. In my home country, in Germany, it's a very big movement now. It's the family constellation of Bert Hellinger. A bit spooky for some of us, but a way that old conflicts of the dead, they live themselves out among the living. And this constellation try to find them out. So I just want to say, some of those things which you find in Africa, we also find in Europe, and most likely also here. Then in Zambia, people believe that there is a spiritual bond with one's family. I have countless stories of people before the advent of the mobile phone who dreamt when one of their relatives died or one of the relatives became sick. Of course I can say, this is just chance, and often I look at it like it. But people don't look at it as a chance moment. For them there is a reconnection between family members, a spiritual connection. If somebody in my family is seriously sick, people dream, and very often follow those dreams. People believe that life forces are affected negatively by sexual transgressions. It's very strong in Zambia. If somebody commits adultery, the husband commits adultery, the wife may die in childbirth, and it's when she gives birth. And it's often a very serious problem, also for pastoral work. Women feel very insecure when giving birth. Of course, in Zambia, many women do die for lack of medical availability of medical services. Many people do die, but there is this strong belief also that the sexual life of the spouse affects one's partner, also spiritually. And there's also the belief that it also affects the children. And again, it's something to engage with and to think about these notions. People believe in the spiritual bond of marriage, that when you are legally married, you are somehow united with each other, also in a spiritual sense. And in the book I wrote, I have a chapter which a couple wrote by themselves about this spiritual bond and how it was affected negatively by others through the forces of witchcraft. There's also a spiritual bond between the families of a married couple, because marriage is not just an individual thing of me marrying my girlfriend, but it's a thing of my family and her family. And when a spouse dies, the remaining spouse has to be cleansed spiritually, which can only be done by the family, by his or her own family. There's a spiritual bond of parenthood. A parent can bless or curse their child. Public roles, to be a headman, to be a chief, it's also a spiritual role. Creative skills, imagination also comes from the spirit world. And finally, there's a shadow, which determines a person's attractiveness, success, and determination. And there are very interesting ways how people regain this shadow when they have a depression, or other ways where they just feel they are manipulated by others. But all this gives rise to very serious pastoral challenges. I have already mentioned that there's a very soft boundary between medicines and witchcraft. People without a good functioning health system obviously have recourse to all kinds of traditional medicine, but the view how to look at medicine is very different from the view of the modern health discourse. You have a lot of fear and suspicions about witchcraft in the own families. Very often it are the families which suspect that one of their members is a witch, when children are dying, when misfortunes are happening. And many killings which take place are often conducted by the own family. There's the violence faced by those thought to be witches. Killings, mob justice, expulsions, stigmatization. But there's also a fascination about the possibilities of witchcraft. People in Zambia are fascinated by it. By the powers which witchcraft promises to them. And there's the exploitation of the beliefs by professional witch finders. And there's moral panics, spiritual insecurity, shifting interpretations. So in Zambia we had a real panic of Satanism. Here there was one of Satanism in the 1980s, 1990s. In Zambia it's a little bit different, but people were expelled from school for no evidence but dreams that other people dreamt about them, and they had to leave school or college. Now there are different approaches to deal with it. Normally within our church these beliefs have just been marginalized. We have not discussed them. They belong to another worldview, and people just try to ignore it. And they thought education will be the solution. Let's just educate people. They will stop to believe in witchcraft. It didn't happen. People, also educated people in Zambia, many believe in the forces of witchcraft and in demons. And the more actually you try to not to speak about them, to ignore them, to belittle them, underneath their potency ever increased. There's another tendency just to explain them. Oh, these are psychological issues, these are social issues. You explain them in another vocabulary. You interpret, you translate. Again, the problem is that your interpretation is very irrelevant to the people who actually experience these forces. Another way, which is done by the charismatic churches, is to affirm them. These forces are there, and Jesus has the answer. Jesus was exorcising spirits. He helped the possessed. And day in and day out, charismatic churches exorcise demons. Now the problem is it validates a web of fear and suspicion. And sometimes it can even cause death. We have some instances where people were killed because in a deliverance session, in an exorcism, they revealed, oh, my father is a witch, my mother is a witch, my uncle is a witch. And this was taken at face value and led to the death of the accused people. And ourselves, the group of the Fingers of Thomas, they wanted to come with a person-centered approach in which the pastor remains part of the discernment process with the affected family, to walk with them and to allow ourselves to be challenged by the experience of the one who is afflicted. Not to have an answer straight away, but to allow the experience of being afflicted by spirits or by witchcraft to affect us too, and to stay a little bit with this experience. Now this is only possible if in the end all sides want to be challenged. Because very often people who come for help, they don't want to be challenged. They want that the spirits go, the demons go. Some believe if my demon goes, I will be healed from HIV or from AIDS. And the demons go, but the sickness remains. And people are again in a crisis. So the approach which we try to develop, it demands that people are also ready to be challenged. Let us look at the third paragraph. We respect that beliefs in spirits and witchcraft are rooted in concrete experiences. When people come, they are afflicted, they have experienced something which I may not have experienced. And I have to respect it. And it is part of their autobiography. If they narrate their lives to others, witchcraft is part of it, and spirits are part of it. Now, if it is part of their biography, how they see themselves, it is also spiritual in nature. It's another way of looking at what is spiritual. Spiritual is not only outside spirits, but if something affects the soul, it is spiritual. So for us, it always deserves prayer. It always deserves to be taken seriously. And we explored the idea how inner images and experiences can be transformed. They can transform themselves when you stay with them. I can give an example. A girl, maybe 9 or 10 years old, very often dreamt of her grandmother in a very negative way. This grandmother had been expelled already from the family. And the girl always dreamt about this grandmother in a negative way, which confirmed for the family that this grandmother is a witch. So in our group, we asked the girl to draw a picture of her dreams. So she drew a picture, very striking. Herself, she was very small. Her grandmother was huge, black. And the face was a snake. Now that was the grandmother. So and then she explained, this is how she looks like in my dreams. And a week later, we asked her to draw another picture. How does God want your grandmother to be? Does God want your grandmother to be like this? No. And she drew a very beautiful picture of two people holding hands, now equal heights, in color, full of butterflies all around, in a shining sun. And she said, this is how God wants my grandmother to be. And then our prayer was simple, let us all try to be the person whom God wants us to be, and also your grandmother. And the dreams stopped. It's a sign that inner experiences of terror can change. If you stay with them, they can change, they can transform themselves. Now, our approach is different from demon-centered approaches. Have a look at the clouds there. This wind around what's up. Here I saw a go, I received it from somebody. Somebody saw in this cloud a demon. If you look, there are some 2 horns here. The eyes. So in this cloud, some persons discerned a demon. So demon-centered approaches, which is often an exorcism. The exorcist concentrates on the demon, addresses the demon, tries to find out where is this demon, what kind of demon is it, what are the signs and symptoms, how will they be expelled. And the solution is an exorcism. And the dynamics is about restoration. Yesterday you didn't have a demon, you were healthy. Today you have a demon, so once you are healed, you go back to yesterday. It's about restoring something which was good in the past. Now, our own approach, we try to be person-centered. All spiritual attacks somehow refer to experiences in the soul. And our guiding questions are, how do attacks by demons challenge the person's life vocation? Towards which relationships do the attacks point? And the solution is to assist the person to get in touch with his or her life's vocation and to address the specific relationships from the viewpoint of this vocation. Maybe briefly an example. In our parish we had very pleasant lady who was our sacristan. It was not a paid job, but voluntary work. But somehow she attracted a lot of jealousies in her own lay group for one reason or another. There was a lot of gossiping about her. One day she fell very sick. She had to be operated. Her bowels were twisted. I visited her in hospital, and the operation was successful. But she told me, no, I had a dream, and in that dream I saw a member of our lay group. She twisted my bowels, and she said, this time you survive, next time it's for real. So, after she left hospital, she left our parish. She left her home. She went to live in another parish, in another place in town, to run away from the witch in her own lay group. So I asked her, okay, it seems the witches have more powers than Jesus Christ. The witches have more powers than your lay group. You have a nice uniform and all that. She said, I cannot take the risk. If I die, who will look after the children? I have to go. For her, it was a matter of life and death. But the experiences of bad dreams continued. So she called me again and again I went with very little success. And one day I found another pastor there from a Pentecostal church who prayed over her, and she collapsed into a trance. And there in trance she spoke about a snake of witchcraft in her. Somehow she had the feeling that the witchcraft came in form of a snake. And this was not made up. She looked like she had this experience. But again, the pastor cast out the demons and the witchcraft, but the dreams continued. And even her children continued to dream. So she called me again, and I was already getting a bit upset, but I always went. But I was getting a bit impatient, and then I started to, instead of praying the snakes away, I started to pray for more snakes. So I asked, may God send more snakes, and tonight let all the snakes bite everybody in the house, and all the children, let them be bitten by the snakes, until we realize that Christ is stronger. And then she said, no, Father, please don't have that prayer. So in the end, we blessed the house. But the result was that she was becoming more in touch with her own vocation. She was part of a lay group, a very active member. But for her, the powers of witchcraft were stronger than the powers of the Christian faith. And we had to help her to believe that also our faith has powers. And somehow it was a little bit successful. So we don't start with an outside definition, but we work with people's own ideas, and especially with their images. And maybe you know the method of Carl Rogers in psychotherapy, very person-centered. So we are inspired by this method to a certain degree. We respect people's own beliefs, even if we don't always share them. But we acknowledge that their concepts provide at that point in time the best possible way of talking about their experiences. And we assume that any major experience that affects a person's inner life is always also spiritual in nature and deserves to be prayed for. So even some people come to us, they are obviously sick, they need to go to hospital. We will send them to hospital, but we will also pray. And we try not to freeze an experience into one single interpretation. I could give plenty of examples, but we don't have enough time, of people who at one point thought they were bewitched. And a week later they had another interpretation of it. So allow those experiences also to change. Then very often people can be helped in a ritual and dramaturgic way of intervention. The Pentecostal churches are very strong. You know, Pentecostal prayer, it's praying with the whole body. People are allowed to fall into a trance, they're allowed to cry, they're allowed to be on the floor. And this can be very helpful. Of course, it can also be led in a direction where people start to accuse others. But this way of prayer as a drama, this is very often what we have missed in Africa in the Catholic Church. Some biblical metaphors of our approach. You remember the story of Jacob, his fight with God. At one point, you remember Jacob, his twin brother Esau, he had stolen the blessings, run away for 14 years, married again, came with all his children back, and he had to face his twin brother Esau. And he was afraid about life and death. And then at night he has this fight with an evil spirit, with something evil. He was fighting the whole night. But then at morning that evil thing wanted to run away, but Jacob didn't let it run away, he grabbed it and he said, "Bless me." Jacob wanted to be blessed by the spiritual attack. And then it turned out to be not a demon, but God himself. And Jacob, he gets another name. He is now called Israel. So God gives him another name, another vocation in his life. He's transformed. So when we deal with spiritual attacks, we don't want to bring people back to yesterday, but to a new tomorrow as transformed people. Then Jacob, he starts to rebuild his relationship with Esau. They're actually now meeting for the first time after 14 years. And he takes up responsibility. He's not just a victim of evil forces, but he fights. And he says, "Let me win this fight." He takes it as a challenge. And this image we very often bring to the possessed and to those affected by witchcraft. And the second metaphor is of Jesus curing the possessed. You remember the story where all the demons are called legio, a legion, because there are many, and they all go into pigs. I'm sure you all remember that story, Mark chapter 5. Now the interesting thing, if you read the interpretation of Walter Wink, the surroundings of where this person lived, they were scared of the Roman legions. The Roman legions had invaded all the countries around, but this region was still independent. They still had a kind of a deal of independence. The deal wouldn't last. In the year 70 after Christ, all those towns were destroyed. By whom? By the Roman legions. So there was that fear about the Roman legions, but also the fascination with the Roman legions. But the possessed, what's the name of his demon? Legion. So Walter Wink, he sees that relationship between a person who is possessed and the fears of his surrounding community. And very often, the possessed are like artists. They dramatize what many people also fear. In Zambia, when many people became fascinated with the Satanists, with their testimonies, what they had all done in the satanic world, people were fascinated because they themselves felt alienated by the forces of modern life. The families are falling apart. In the past, in Zambia, people had solidarity in the larger family, but now it's very difficult to keep a family intact because modern life demands that the children go to school. They want the children to go to school. School is very expensive, so you can just afford to keep your own children in school. You can hardly care for the children of your cousins and the children of your brothers and sisters. It's no longer possible today. So solidarity shifts, and many people are lost with it. So many of the images which the possessed bring out in their state of trance when they are possessed, they mirror very often the fears and the forces which the surrounding communities also feel. So we find it better, instead of looking at the possessed as people with whom there's something wrong, we believe they have actually something to say. not in a straightforward way, as a one-to-one, but in a picturesque way. We have to try to find out what are the nerves which they actually touch in the community. Now here are a few examples, but I think time is not really with us to go through all of them, but maybe just let me take the third example, the Lengue family. It started with a mother, a woman who dreamt of her own mother, who had died quite some time ago, but suddenly she was back in a dream in a coffin. Then they had a number of misfortunes in the family, and they tried to think about witchcraft. Now, in our group, somebody had a very nice way of dealing with the dream. And he asked the woman, after listening again and again, who was all there around the coffin, and she mentioned all her family members. And then she herself, she said that, there was also my niece, you know, of my late brother, the daughter. Now she is kept by his wife's family, but she doesn't even go to school. She is not really very well cared for. So the group members said, well, maybe the dream doesn't mean that there's witchcraft. Maybe the dream means you as a family, you should take care of your niece. That's why your mother comes back again and again in the dream. And it made sense to the family. They took the niece, they cared for her, sent her to school, and they felt blessed. So it's a way that sometimes by looking at relationships and something what needs to be done, for us it's often a better way than just exorcising and praying away a dream or praying away spirits. Or the last example, Banalaki, very interesting. She lived in a very oppressive marriage. This was a girl we knew before she got married. She was choir mistress. Wonderful. She could conduct our choir. We were all fascinated. She was dancing. There was life in her. She got married. After a short time, she stopped coming to church. The husband was not at ease. Then she got children, 1, 2, 3. You stop having time for any choir. You are now just at home washing the nappies of your children. And she had no more friends. You know, this was a girl, very active, very lively. Suddenly, her domestic life became very boring. She suddenly got spirits, demons. She was roaring like a lion. She was a very feeble girl, so the first time I heard her roaring, I could hear it 400 or 500 meters away. I was amazed. And then, you know, one way is just to pray this out. You bad spirits, go out in the name of Jesus, out, you know. But we all felt, well, this woman, she should be roaring like a lion. She was a lion before, and now she's a small pussycat there in her marriage. And we had to help her to come out, not out of the marriage, but to speak with her husband, speak with her, to take again a public role. Be a lion, you know. And so we always hope that a spiritual affliction transforms a person. It should transform the person into something greater. Now, to deal with witchcraft is much more difficult. To deal with spirits, for me, it's much easier. Because if it is a spirit, responsible is not a human being. But if it is witchcraft, it is a human being. And these are just examples, I will not go through them, just of people, just of the recent year, of people I know who have been killed in Zambia, in my own parish, as witches. Because of a dream, because of a divination, and of course these people were often also difficult people. Those who are accused to be witches are not the ones who are the friends of everybody. But witchcraft beliefs can turn very, very violent in Africa and surely in Zambia. And yet I believe that a positive engagement is necessary if we want those beliefs to be transformed. Even in the Bible, we know that in the Jewish faith, child sacrifice was practiced. Why did Abraham want to sacrifice his son, Isaac? Why did he want to sacrifice him? Because it was the practice of the day. Up to today, in the Jewish faith, the firstborn son has to be redeemed. They pay, I think, 6 shekels. Don't remember how much. Jesus had to be redeemed when he was born. Now, you know, a belief in child sacrifice, which is a nightmare, could transform itself into a very positive belief. And it ended in Jesus Christ being sacrificed for us. And all the theology of the sacrificial lamb, the Lamb of God, in a way it's related to child sacrifice, which is a very negative thing. And yet it was allowed over many, many years to transform itself. But the belief can only transform itself if you engage with it. If we ignore it, we say it's superstition, it will not transform itself. It will become even more potent underground. And what is also difficult when you deal with witchcraft, you will always burn your fingers. There's so much hatred between the families, but also the witches whom you protect, they very often believe as much in witchcraft as the accusers. And they may be accusing other people. And it becomes a vicious circle, very, very difficult to deal with. And there we developed a kind of an easy method, not easy in the sense that it is in the sense that it is simple. And I just to wind off, I want to introduce these methods. It's about separating the inner world from the outer world. Imaginary is not the unreal, but the realm where the real and the unreal become indistinguishable from one another. You can't say anymore what is real and what is not real. And that's the situation we are in. When somebody has a demon, when somebody is attacked by witchcraft, who is to say what is real and what is not real? It is very difficult from outside. So we have to have another method. It's no longer real against not real, true versus false, physical versus spiritual. Even that doesn't work. People who have spiritual experiences, for them it's physical. It's not either objective against subjective. What is objective for you? You will call it subjective. For me, it's very objective. So in practice, those distinctions are not practical for us in a pastoral approach. So what we look at is another distinction. We look at how do we want to deal with it. And there are certain parts we deal in public. And there are certain parts we deal privately. In the church, there's always been a distinction between the inner forum and the outer forum. The outer forum, it's things which are known to everybody. In the private, in the inner forum, they are confidential things. And there are certain things in our prayers we deal privately with people. Otherwise, we start accusing others of witchcraft. And there are other parts we need to deal openly with them. In the inner world, we put statements that speak about things we cannot put the finger of the doubting Thomas on. If somebody said, I dreamt of Bambo Bolzani last night, and he did this and this, I cannot check. I cannot come scientifically and prove your dream is right or your dream is wrong. So this is for us inner world. But outer world are things to which actually I have access to. I can ask witnesses about. And in witchcraft cases, there are always some things which we can all see. For example, some people are accused to be witches because they have threatened others. They have said, you will see. Now, if you say in Zambia, you will see, it means you will see the forces of witchcraft. So in our parish, when somebody says, you will see, we call them. We call them to the church council. If it is a Catholic who tells his fellow Catholic, you will see, we call them. If it is somebody else, we also call them or go to their homes. What did you mean by your threat? very often there are rumors of witchcraft. They are surrounded actually by things which are empirical. So those we have to challenge. But other things we have to transform in the inner world, in the inner forum, trying to work with the images and to transform them. I think here I stop. It's because I would like just for some minutes maybe to give the chance for some questions and some comments.
I'm Jonathan Hill with Maryknoll. Worked for some years in Tanzania. And one of the things that I noticed there is the prevalence of street children, which I'm sure is also prevalent in Zambia. And basically what, well, one thing that was always troubling to me was how this could be, that the kids in the African context especially would end up in this way. And then of course there are many, many reasons why. But what percentage have you seen, or if you have any idea, of those who are accused of witchcraft are children?
In the past, witches were not children. In the past. Now, in the past, there were no street children either. In the past, in Zambia, there were no orphans. Because if your biological parents died, others would take care of you. Their brothers, their sisters, the wider family would take care of you. Now, the past is no longer there. And today, especially in the towns, more and more children are on the streets. Now, in our parish, we had around 40 children whom one of my confreres collected from the streets again and again. And many of them were accused by their children, by their families, to be witches. Many of them saw themselves as witches. And that's a quite interesting thing and sad thing, you know. A child who is always told there's something wrong with you, there's something wrong with you, in the end they make this their story. This is my story, there's something wrong with me. And they also see that other people start to fear them. And there's a certain vicious cycle, you know. The child feels special in that sense, but it doesn't work for the benefit of the child. And the child becomes exploited by the adults. When the child dreams, the dream is interpreted by the adults and applied to people the child doesn't even know. So it is very, very difficult for children. A lot of children are also traumatized. If they are on the street, they are abused, nearly all of them. So when you work with street children, you also work with a whole series of trauma. And there, witchcraft is often a way to deal with the trauma, because you can express your trauma through reference to demons or witchcraft, but you cannot tell people what actually happened. When you have been abused, you can't speak about it. So it is easier for children to take the narrative of witchcraft or demons than somehow to take the narrative of child abuse. So maybe that's some parts of the dynamics, but obviously it is each child is different and each trauma is very different. But when a child has been on the streets for some months, this is enough. They will be on drugs and they will be abused.
Is there a Zambian concept of what we would call psychosis or schizophrenia, apart from demonic possession? And the second question, since I have a mic and there's nobody behind me, are there people who come to feel guilt over what they might have done, perhaps as witches or to witches? And is there a need for some kind of spiritual redress of this guilt for perhaps some very real wrongs?
About the first question, I'm not sure, but in our group we have one member who was very much involved to develop this approach. He is schizophrenic. He talks about it. He had visions about being followed, but he managed to manipulate his own visions. And he was taught this by a traditional healer. He is a man who studied in China. Many people in Zambia now do study in China. He studied to be a medical doctor, and he became crazy. In China, he was flown back to Zambia in chains. Very violent. And then he had this experience of people following him and so on. His family brought him to various churches. He was prayed over. It made him only more angry. And in the end, he was treated by a traditional healer in a way that the healer called both parts of the family, of his mother, of the father. They had to come. They had to make special foods for him. He had to go on a spiritual journey. And at a certain point, the healer told him, now you are alone. And you have to face those people alone. And he managed to transform them. So these threatening people suddenly became friendly people. So he had this idea of transforming them. Now, is there a Zambian concept? For me, very often when people have these psychotic experiences, it is either a spirit or it is a form of witchcraft. But different healers have different ways of dealing with it, some of them very successful. There's a lot to learn about. Your second question briefly was?
Guilt.
Guilt. In my experience, very little. People who come to me, I can say only one person who came and who told me that somebody needed to be killed in order to prepare medicines for him. And he was very disturbed by it. And he wanted help because of the guilt he had. This is one case in 100. People who come to me, they feel that others bewitch them, that they are guilty, but they are totally themselves totally innocent. And it's ourselves, our approach is to put a challenge to them. Are you really 100% innocent? You know, who of us is? And to develop a little bit of a sense of guilt, in my experience, for those who come for help, it's often very difficult, but it's part of our process.
As a foreigner, how do you develop trust with people to heal them? Is it through your relationships? Yeah, I know you've been there for 25 years, you're religious, but how do they come to someone who is totally outside their narrative and believe you? And also, have you seen empirical, objective evidence of witchcraft ever?
For a healer, it's of advantage to be a foreigner.
It is, okay.
Yes. In Zambia, all healers are from somewhere else. If you're a Zambian healer, you say, I'm from Congo. I'm from Nigeria. Then you are a very famous healer. If you are just from the neighboring village, no, you can't be a healer. So it's actually of benefit to be from another place. So they have this kind of trust just from the fact that you are a foreigner. They give you very often more trust. But how healing works, it goes from word to mouth. You know, for ourselves, just to give people an ear to listen to their stories, it's already healing. In many cases, you hear just by listening. I have no idea what to say. I have no idea what to do. I just listen and somehow stay with the experience for some time and see somehow how it develops. You know, it's a very maybe intuitive approach, but people appreciate to be listened to. Just that is often enough. And then our ministry is a team ministry. We have different women, different men in our team. So what I cannot do, another person can do better. And it's like of this doing things together, which kind of helps. And therefore maybe also more people feel confident because it's not only one person, but it's several persons. They may not be at ease with me, but they may be very much at ease with somebody else. But still we are in the same team.
Is your approach psychological and spiritual, would you
Both.
say? Yeah.
We never separate.
It's one.
So yes, we believe that many of the issues are psychological, but they are also spiritual, you know. I mean, they affect the person, so it's spiritual in that sense. Did I ever see hard evidence of witchcraft? Yes. Evidence in the sense that it's being practiced. We have murders. We have, just where Father Bresani comes from, last year, I think an albino woman was cut the arm or what?
Right, yes. From here.
But she's alive?
She is alive, she's alive.
So these things are happening. Albinos are attacked, their body parts are thought to increase riches, to give powers. Those things are happening. Not as much as people fear. For each real story there are 10 or 50 others which are just rumors. But there's a core there. The forces of witchcraft. I did experience once or twice things which I cannot explain. I have described them in the book. But again, this is not a hard fact. This is how I experienced those things at that point in time. And somebody else will give a very different interpretation to it. It's not a proof, but yes, I did have one or two experiences of evil kind of presence, which I cannot kind of explain otherwise. But I would be very open to look also at psychological reasons, and I describe them in one chapter of the book.
Thank you.
I just had a question about the dream aspect of it. I was wondering if there were any differences when individuals who believe themselves to be witches or Satanists, if there are any differences between those dreams that they themselves had and dreams that the community had about them, and also if there are some sort of generalizations about these dreams in general when the individual has them in the community.
The dreams of those who see themselves as Satanists are very similar in nature. Very often, like the way they describe it, they are even standardized. That sometimes you doubt, did you dream that or did you read it in a book, you know? But very often they are dreams of going, of flying, of going to the ocean, of meeting snakes, of meeting a lion. Many of the dreams, I wrote them down and they come back again the same and the same images. But they are about a person being introduced, being initiated into another parallel spiritual world. This is what their dreams are about. Dreams of people who feel attacked. It's very often, just to narrate one, it was our clinical officer, he dreamt that one of our Catholic members, an elderly man I knew very well, I slept several times in his house, in his family, dreamt of him sending a snake to him, which entered him, and somebody else tried to pull it out and the snake cut into two. And then one half remained in, and one half went out. Now, after that dream became public, another family had a death case, not the clinical officer, but another family, and they went to a diviner who said, it's this man the other man dreamed about, he was killed. So when spiritual attacks, like the dreams are negative, they are nightmares. You wake up, something is chasing you, you know, with a concrete face. And sometimes this can be enough to accuse somebody of witchcraft. But the accusation doesn't always stick. Like, you may dream about one person and speak about him, nobody believes, oh, this one is not a witch. But it may stick to another person whom people don't like anyway, you know, and it becomes very convenient. At that point, they even want to believe in witchcraft. But generally speaking, dreams of the witches or Satanists are dreams of being initiated into another world, very standardized. Dreams of spiritual attacks are very negative dreams, nightmares.
Two quick questions. One has to do with the prevalence of global Pentecostalism and some of the newer forms of witchcraft that you said are sort of ancient in Zambian culture. Second would be the predominance of females being afflicted, because the photos you showed were almost all women who were being prayed over by males. And I just want to know if in Zambian deliverance churches that's typically the case.
That is typically the case. And people I dealt with, out of 100, I would easily say 75 are women. maybe even more?
Slightly more.
Even more. Now, why are more women possessed? I always ask when we give a workshop, I ask people, and I ask the possessed, why do you think it are more women? And the answers are quite interesting. Some say that, speaking for the women, we women are closer to life. We are more sensitive to life. This kind of answer comes back often. Some answers are very pragmatic. One woman who has spirits, she said, no, you know, we women in Africa, we're always pounding the whole day, you know. So we get all kinds of things, you know. So you get different answers. Now for us, you know, if you look at a person who is possessed, that they have an enormous potential which they cannot live, let's say like the woman in an oppressive marriage, then if there are more women possessed, it means that women have less chances to live their lives to their full potential. A man has it easier in Africa to live his life. He has work, he's out, he has friends. His life increases. You know, the onion, remember the model of the onion? Your spiritual life becomes bigger and bigger. A man has a marriage, has children, but his life is bigger than that. He is a village head man, he has relationships, he is consulted, he speaks in public. But for the woman, especially for the young married woman, she has very little to say. It are maybe the elderly women who rule the house, but not her. So once she gets married, she was very attractive before, life becomes smaller. And I see the spirits as an invitation to your life's vocation. Live your life to the full. It's something which should help you to become more in touch with your own life vocation. So if there are more women possessed, it means the society leaves less space for women to come to live up to their full potential. That would be one of my explanations. Now, your first question is about Pentecostalism. Yes, beliefs have transformed unbelievably. I mentioned already that 20 years ago there was no thing like Satanism in Zambia. Today it's full of it, even in the villages we live. Everybody knows what is Satanism. This has come very much through Pentecostal churches, the many newer ones, because they were also so appealing because of their drama. You know, these exorcisms, it touches something. And like our own way of worship can be rather boring for people, but there they can, they were attracted by it. And yes, the images have been transformed tremendously, sometimes in a dualistic way, you know. Like spirits in the past were often ambivalent. They were not bad, they were not good. They could make you mad, they could also make you into a healer. They could do both, depending how you dealt with the spirits. But today, in the Christian framework, all spirits are bad. They are never positive.
This will be our last question.
I just had a question on if foreigners' dreams or there would be taken into the context of importance within Zambian spirituality. Like if you as a foreigner have living in Zambia for 20 years, would you having a dream that be considered in terms of witchcraft or Satanism, or is it kind of just more within Zambian people?
You know, like all these dynamics of spirits is a dynamic of a discernment. When somebody dreams, it doesn't mean straight away they go into witchcraft. But it means, oh, this has also happened, this one has also dreamt, and very often the discernment takes place in the own family. If you are not a member of the family, you are very often outside the whole system of witchcraft and spirits. You will just be ignored, your dreams will be ignored, and so on. But it's the context which makes a dream potent, that it becomes a dream of witchcraft, that it becomes a dream of spirits. It's the context in it, and the context is the family. It's those who care for the sick and so on. They, in the end, it's not even the sick himself. Maybe you are dreaming and you don't even think of witchcraft, but your family thinks of it, you know, because of a certain context they are in. So you have to be part of that context. If you are aloof to it, you will not be accused, And you will not be either, your dreams will also maybe not be relevant, but you may touch a nerve nevertheless. And even for people, it's a question of, let's call it luck. Some dreams are totally ignored. Some dreams are taken up by everybody. And very often we don't see really the nerve they have touched.
On behalf of the center, I want to thank all you guys for coming out on a super cold evening. And especially thank Bernhard for giving us this really fascinating window.
First time in Chicago.